you're chewing, and chewing, and chewing. A single bite of raw meat can take you 45 minutes just to get down. And somewhere, hundreds of thousands of years ago, one of your ancestors got tired of that and changed the entire trajectory of the human brain by accident. Here's the question we're actually asking today. Not does cooked food taste better? Sure, mostly we're not disputing that. The real question is stranger and has much higher stakes. Did cooking food do something to us biologically? And here's the thing nobody tells you. According to a growing body of research, cooking may not just be something humans do. It may be one of the reasons humans exist in our current form at all. This idea is most closely associated with primatologist Richard Wrangham, who laid it out in detail in his 2009 book, Catching Fire: How Cooking Made Us Human. Wrangham's argument, now generally called the cooking hypothesis, is direct and a little unsettling once you sit with it. He proposes that the invention of cooking wasn't a cultural nicety layered on top of an already modern human body. It was a prerequisite for that body to evolve in the first place. Let that sit for a second. The claim isn't just cooking is convenient. The claim is that without cooking, the human brain as we know it might not exist. To understand why, you have to start with a genuinely brutal fact about raw food. It costs an enormous amount of energy just to extract calories from it. Chewing raw meat and fibrous plant matter requires powerful jaw muscles and a huge amount of time. Modern studies estimate that wild chimpanzees, our closest living relatives, spend roughly half of their entire waking day chewing. Not preparing food, not hunting for it, just chewing it because raw food is tough, fibrous, and calorically stingy relative to the effort required to break it down. Cooking changes this equation dramatically. Heat breaks down tough connective tissue in meat and ruptures the cell walls in starchy plants, making the calories inside dramatically easier for your digestive system to access. Researchers have directly measured this. In controlled studies comparing raw versus cooked meat and starches, cooked food yields significantly more usable calories per gram for the same amount of chewing and digestive effort. Some estimates suggest cooking can increase the net energy a body extracts from a meal by a substantial margin. Different foods vary, but the effect is consistently in the same direction across nearly everything we cook. So what does more available energy actually buy you, evolutionarily speaking? This is where the story connects to something genuinely dramatic: brain size. The human brain is extraordinarily expensive to run. Despite making up only about 2% of average body weight, it consumes roughly 20% of your body's total resting energy, a staggering, disproportionate share. Any evolutionary path toward a bigger, more energy-hungry brain requires solving a basic math problem first. Where does the extra energy come from? You either eat drastically more raw food, which runs into the chewing time ceiling we just described, or you find a way to make the calories you already have go further. Wrangham's argument is that cooking solved exactly this problem. By dramatically increasing caloric yield and cutting down digestive effort, cooked food may have freed up the metabolic budget that allowed the brain to grow larger over evolutionary time, while simultaneously allowing the gut, which is also metabolically expensive tissue, to shrink, since cooked food requires far less digestive machinery to break down than raw food does. This connects to something called the expensive tissue hypothesis, proposed by researchers Leslie Aiello and Peter Wheeler in 1995. The idea that brain tissue and gut tissue are in a kind of metabolic trade-off. Animals with large, complex guts, built for processing large volumes of hard-to-digest raw food, tend to have smaller brains relative to body size, and vice versa. Humans have unusually small guts and unusually large brains compared to other primates of similar body size. Exactly the pattern you'd predict if something had reduced our digestive burden, freeing up energy for our brains instead. Now here's where we have to be careful, because cooking makes calories easier to extract and cooking directly caused human brain evolution are two different claims, separated by a real evidentiary gap, specifically the gap of fire evidence. If cooking drove the dramatic brain expansion seen in Homo erectus, starting roughly 1.9 million years ago, we should expect to find equally old, equally widespread evidence of controlled fire use. But the archaeological record here is genuinely messy. Some of the earliest strong evidence for controlled fire use comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, where researchers found burned bone and ash deposits dated to roughly 1 million years ago, solid, but noticeably younger than the earliest brain expansion in Homo erectus. Some other sites suggest possible fire use even earlier, but the evidence is far more contested, with debates over whether burned materials found at certain sites resulted from deliberate human fire use or natural wildfires that simply happened to occur nearby. This is a genuinely important gap in the cooking hypothesis, and Wrangham himself has acknowledged it directly. His response is that fire use may simply have been happening earlier than we currently have confirmed physical evidence for. Early, small, infrequent campfires don't necessarily leave the kind of durable archaeological signature that later, more established fire use does, especially across 1,000,000+ years of subsequent geological disturbance. But this is, admittedly, an argument from absence of contrary evidence rather than a smoking gun in favor. The honest state of the field is, brain expansion and definitively confirmed widespread fire use don't line up perfectly in the current archaeological record, and that mismatch remains a real point of ongoing debate among researchers. So what else besides fire evidence supports the cooking hypothesis? This is where the comparative anatomy gets genuinely compelling. Compare human jaws, teeth, and guts to those of chimpanzees, and the differences are stark in exactly the direction you'd predict if cooked food had been part of human evolution for a very long time. Chimpanzee jaws are massive relative to body size, built to generate enormous chewing force against tough, raw plant fiber. Human jaws are dramatically smaller and weaker by comparison. Chimpanzee teeth, particularly molars, are large and heavily built for grinding. Human teeth, especially molars, are noticeably smaller. And critically, the human digestive tract, particularly the large intestine, where raw fibrous plant material gets fermented and broken down, is significantly reduced compared to what you'd expect for a primate our size, exactly matching the expensive tissue hypothesis's prediction. None of these anatomical features are things a modern individual chooses. They're inherited, evolved traits, meaning something about our evolutionary diet must have consistently favored smaller jaws, smaller teeth, and a reduced gut over an enormous span of time. A diet that still required intense raw food processing would have kept selecting for the opposite: bigger jaws, bigger teeth, a bigger gut, the way we still see in chimpanzees today. There's also a striking practical experiment that reinforces this, even though it wasn't originally designed as one. Modern humans who attempt strict long-term raw food diets, even sophisticated modern raw diets using blenders and dehydrators rather than primitive raw foraging, frequently struggle to maintain adequate caloric intake and often experience reduced fertility and lower body weight, according to several nutrition studies tracking long-term raw foodists. This doesn't prove ancient humans couldn't survive on raw food at all. Clearly, for a long stretch of our evolutionary history, our ancestors did exactly that. But it does suggest that once brain size, jaw size, and gut size had already evolved in the cooked food direction, reversing back to a fully raw diet with a modern human body specifically is metabolically difficult. Additional indirect evidence that our current bodies are shaped around an expectation of cooked food, not raw. So where does that leave us? A genuinely expensive brain that needs an unusual amount of energy. A gut, jaw, and teeth that are anatomically reduced in exactly the pattern you'd expect if cooking had been part of human evolution for a very long time. Confirmed fire evidence that's real, but doesn't perfectly overlap in timing with the earliest brain expansion, and modern raw food experiments suggesting our current bodies genuinely struggle without cooked food's energy efficiency. The honest answer is that we don't know the exact moment someone first held food over a flame instead of eating it raw, or whether they were thinking about taste, texture, safety from parasites, or something else entirely. We don't know precisely how early or how consistently fire was used across the deep timeline where human brain size was expanding. But the anatomical evidence in our own bodies, the small jaw you're using to read this sentence out loud if you tried, the disproportionately large brain currently processing it, points toward cooking as something considerably more consequential than a cultural convenience layered on top of an already finished human body. That's the strange part of this story that's easy to miss. Something as ordinary as holding food over a fire might be one of the quiet reasons your brain is capable of language, abstract thought, and reading a sentence like this one at all. Not because fire made food taste better, because it made energy available that your ancestors' bodies had never had access to before, and evolution, given that kind of opportunity, built something entirely new out of it.